All right, folks. We're a couple of minutes after the top of the hour, and we have a lot of content to cover. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. And just like with a webinar, a couple of quick bits of information. What would be very helpful, just so we can give you an opportunity to ask questions, but not necessarily deal with cutting in and out of audio with a bunch of folks. If you can queue up any questions in the chat window, Margie will help me out by just kind of organizing those. And once we get towards the end, then I'll go back and tackle a bunch of the questions. I think this will probably be the most expeditious way of being able to get everybody's questions answered, but also cover all the material and do so in a pretty coordinated fashion. So welcome. Thank you for taking time out today. Just quick feedback. Can all of you see the slide deck that should be shared at this point? Just a couple of yeses would be sufficient.
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. So background, why are we doing StoragePoint training now? One, it's a great refresher. It's a product that's one of our top producers, has great ASP, helps you on your quota, all really good stuff. We are in the process of executing a campaign that is designed to help you guys go back in and mine our larger customers for a lot of good StoragePoint business. We'll talk about the campaign towards the end of the training, help you to understand what it is, but the training is going to help you engage with some of the people that we are also reaching out to from a marketing perspective. And we have a couple of specific asks for you, and so making sure that you're equipped and up to speed and refreshed is an important part of that. So what we're going to do is go through something that may be a little bit different than the way that you've previously done sales trainings. Most of this talk today and discussion is going to be around understanding the SharePoint administrator, their pains, some of the key concepts, the content and challenges that are out there. It's not going to be as focused on feature-rich breakdown of StoragePoint. Okay. I figure if I can help to provide some knowledge around the pain points that SharePoint admins are thinking about, what they're encountering every day, it's going to help you to foster conversations. It's going to help you to be credible in their eyes, and it's going to keep you out of that area of just going in and trying to hammer home a product when what you should be doing is helping to be a consultative seller in this particular for a product like this. So a lot of time is going to be spent on understanding and doing some storytelling here. So with that in mind, bear with me as we go through this. Now, one caveat, you're going to see a lot of things that are kind of fun and humorous around blobs and externalization. However, what I want to make sure is that the key takeaways as we go through this, don't think about blobs, don't think about StoragePoint, and don't think about externalization. Okay? They help me to tell the story. They'll help you to understand. It'll help you to then be able to talk to folks, but the big things are understand their pains and understand the things that they have to solve in order to be able to make a good case for why they would need a product like this. So we all know that SharePoint is this fantastic tool. Everybody, it seems like, and their brother uses this to collaborate, to store content, and they use it in many different ways. They use it on tablets, they use it on their desktop, all kinds of different content that's going in here too. Now, all of the content that they store, whether it's multimedia files, CAD drawings, spreadsheets, you name it, all of this different kind of content does have something in common. Okay, it's all unstructured. You know, we refer to them as blobs, and it gives us a great way of sharing what this is all about. But the key thing is SharePoint is used as a catch-all to put every piece of content an organization has, or ideally it should have the ability to store all of that content. As we'll see, that's not always the case. Now, kind of turning it into some numbers a little bit here, SharePoint, typical customers have more than a terabyte of content stored out there. Okay, that's just within SharePoint. And the average farm's growing 50 to 75%. So you already have a case where a lot of content, a lot of growth, which creates a lot of challenges for people trying to manage that growth. But strangely enough, all of that content is not all good content. In fact, a large percentage of it is kind of crazy. 60% of it's out of date. 85% never gets touched, never gets retrieved or used after the author actually creates it. And we're paying top dollar to store this stuff in a very sophisticated system with expensive storage, and storing all that stuff actually causes all of the system to slow down. So there's all of these pains out there. So bottom line is, you store content in a database, that database gets full, it starts to get bloated, and it doesn't perform well. A little bit of background. Many of you don't come from an IT background or have a lot of experience there. If you go far enough back, SQL Server itself was designed with a very specific purpose in mind. SQL Server, by the way, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, SQL Server is the content storage place inside of SharePoint. Okay, all content goes there. SQL Server was designed for content, but it was designed for text-based content, high volume transactions that were flowing through an organization in a very predictable way. It could be invoices, it could be certain kinds of records. Okay, Microsoft used that as part of SharePoint as the best option at the time, as its storage architecture, to store all this stuff. And it was great in the beginning because SharePoint actually was used to store, at the departmental level, much more text-heavy type of information. But over time, the size of the unstructured part of the information that was being stored got larger and larger. And it's actually something that you can store pretty large files in. But the problem is there is a hard limit in almost all versions, and we'll talk about 2016 in a minute. But you have a file size limit of 2 gigabytes. And while that seems really large, what we've seen is that the average size of content has been going up about the same rate as the growth within a database. And why is that? It's because there is a massive amount of new file types, multimedia file types, that are being incorporated into a collaboration type of environment. And you quickly hit those limits. And since that is a limit, you have some challenges here. You think about any organization. You can be in the entertainment business, you can be in an architectural firm, you can be in security and healthcare. You have massive files that are being stored out there. In fact, if you happen to be taking advantage of new 4K video type files, let's say a marketing team is doing something with 4K video because it's in the entertainment business, you're talking about file types that can be a terabyte in size. That's just, it's unfathomable a few years ago. So you have all of these large file types, and what happens if you can't store them? Let's just take understanding the pain a little bit here. If you can't store these files, it's not that they just go away. There's users who are using these files. It's core to their jobs. They all of a sudden start going out there and using other unsanctioned products. They start going out and using Box and Dropbox and Google. Okay, they're into that shadow IT world because they can and because they have to get their job done. They don't care about the admin at that particular point. The admin's hands are tied because they can't do anything to incorporate and manage and control this environment. So they're in a real conundrum. They have rogue employees going off doing stuff by necessity, and they don't have anything they can do. Now, when you add all of these content and files into SQL Server, performance really starts to suffer. And so Microsoft, in addition to file size limits, had come up with some recommended limits around database sizes. And for many, many years, that recommended limit has been 200 gigabytes. They found that that's a very practical limit. You can go larger And in fact, I've done a lot of research with our customers, and the typical customer has at least one database that's in excess of 500 gigabytes. Frequently, their average database size is bigger than that, but everybody's trying to adhere to these best practices when they can, because it just works better when they do. What happens when they go larger than that? Well, admins and users start to see some unusual behavior. Things start to seem like it's broken, even if it's not. And what happens when users see unusual behavior, they get very unhappy and start complaining to admin, and it creates a real pain for them. So you have large file types, but you can't include all the content in an organization. That means your employees are going elsewhere, you've lost control, and you effectively aren't managing all the content you're supposed to be. And that becomes very important as we talk about compliance here in a little bit. You have limits on database sizes that, for practical reasons, you can't go larger. When you have those, it makes your management experience very difficult. And so this is where the concept of saying, okay, the pain points are driving me to seek a solution. And many times people don't understand that there is an option out there. We still are surprised in a market that is this mature that people don't understand that you can externalize. Okay, so we actually have to help people understand that you can actually take this content, which is the core creating the problem, and it's going to, you can take that content and pull it out. So we take the unstructured content, we take the blobs, and we move that someplace else. And this is great because all of a sudden you can streamline your SharePoint environment by up to 95%. That's a massive reduction of your hard-working environment. So 95% reduction, all that content being pulled out has to go somewhere. So where does it go? Beauty of it is it goes anywhere the admin wants to put it. Okay, if you think about, if one size fits all, if I take all my content and cram it in a SQL server, and that gets bloated and it's very expensive and performance starts to suffer and it excludes certain kinds of files, it's just a suboptimal environment. Your storage architecture is fundamentally broken whether you realize it or not. But if you can pull all those out, now you can take each piece of content and based on what it's used for, the admin can choose the appropriate cost performance balance type of hardware to store it on. So you can put some of it out on a high performing NAS device. It just happens to be a little bit cheaper, still gives you kind of the performance you might be looking for. You might have to store some of it for compliance reasons out there in a CAS device or some type of other uneditable type of device. You might be putting it in archives just because you have long retention requirements for some reason, could be regulatory driven. Or you can put it out there in the cloud. You might be moving there, or you might want to take advantage of cold storage or other types of environments where the cost basis is so much less expensive. Now, when you do this and you free up, your core SharePoint environment, SharePoint now can perform at a very high performance level. Okay, that means that you can return it back to the kind of environment that people enjoy using. Now, one of the things that had always plagued us, if people knew about externalization and they weren't really that knowledgeable, but they had a little bit of a working knowledge, they may have heard at some point Microsoft or a Microsoft rep, somebody in there, say that Microsoft recommends not externalizing. They recommend against it, which always put us behind the 8 ball. Well, that's been solved. Office 365, which is the big flagship now, everybody focuses on this, uses externalization. The content that's stored in SharePoint Online in Office 365 gets externalized to Azure. Why? For the exact same reasons. We now have internal validation from Microsoft that the recommended best practice as you move forward is to externalize. So this becomes great for those who are on premise to have a point of reference that comes out of Microsoft that puts them in this frame of mind and says, okay, this is okay. It's not just what you're saying, it's what Microsoft's actually doing. So now what about SharePoint 2016? Even though a small percentage of our customer base is currently on that, it's still top of mind, and a lot of people make decisions, even if they have no intent in moving to 2016, that will stall out opportunities. So we need to be able to address this, because there are changes that affect the mindset around storage architecture. For the first time in many versions, there's a couple of key changes. File size limits have now increased. So one of the biggest things that people encountered was, admins encountered was, look, I can't put something that's larger than 2 gigabytes. Well, that limit's gone. It's now up to 10 gigabytes. So you now have files that are up to 5 times larger that can go into 2016. Same thing with database limits. The database limit has now, the recommended database limit has now moved up, and you can put a terabyte size database out there. So use the administrator community might look at this and say, problem solved, but not so fast. Okay. Just because you can do something, should you? There's a lot of different issues. You would think that by upping the limit, you're going to be able to increase performance. But in fact, when you do stuff by putting these really large files and a lot of stuff directly into SharePoint, you start to run into all kind of problems. So you have these questions that you ask them, even if it's rhetorical, you're not expecting them to answer, but you want them to hear it and focus on it. How much longer are your users going to wait for files that are that large? Now, a little side note is, there's been a lot of external benchmarks done that show access through SharePoint to SQL Server and back is much slower. It's a 2x performance different in that round trip than going out to a file server to get the content. And that's beautiful because that's a point that nobody ever challenges. So if you're putting really large files out there, you're already going to have a challenge with long wait times. You don't want to exacerbate that problem. How long do full backups take? If your backups of SharePoint, if let's say you had a 500 gigabyte database and you were backing that up and it took you on average 4 hours, and now you have something that's twice as large, how long are your backups going to take? Well, about twice as long. So as you grow these environments, what happens is your backups become problematic. They start to fail. They stop fitting into your backup windows. So these new wonderful limits allow you to cram more stuff in, and it'll all of a sudden increase all of these secondary problems that they're going to have. And so by understanding that they may be looking to this and they maybe haven't done it yet, you can say, well, let's take a deeper dive. What's going to happen to the other parts of your day-to management type activities? What's going to happen to your backups? What's going to happen if you have to mount a backup for recovery? Okay. There's hard limits inside of what SharePoint and SQL Server can handle on the mounting. If backup was a problem, recovery is going to be near impossible. So if they have any concern about actually using their backups for a purpose, these are kinds of questions that you want to be asking them to think about. So really more than ever, 2016 shouldn't be something that causes us to get defensive. It should drive the need and help them to understand the awareness. Externalize blobs to secure your performance becomes a very important thing as multimedia grows, content grows. All of these things are happening to an environment. So we've been talking generically about a storage architecture that goes from being SQL Server only to being this broader, flexible, very nimble type of architecture that can satisfy all of their needs and solve these problems. But what about a compliant storage architecture? One of the things that's really relevant across many of our product lines now is the need for security, the need for adherence to different kinds of external factors. And StoragePoint is well situated to do just this. But why do we need to create a compliant storage architecture? Why do we need to go beyond SQL Server, which is not inherently compliant when integrated with SharePoint? Well, 3/4 of all companies each year get sued. Half of the companies have 6 or more lawsuits. Almost all of those lawsuits involve information access, and being able to validate that through audits and e-discovery and all these other activities that the content that's out there is complete, unaudited, unchanged, and fundamentally shows that you have developed a set of processes that allows them to trust your data. SQL Server does not do this. Does not do it in a way that people need to be doing it. So when you look at an environment that's been externalized, you still store metadata in SQL Server. You might even store some content in SQL Server because it's a SAN device. But you store a lot of other information out there based on the appropriate nature of what that content is, how frequently it needs to be accessed, what's the cost performance of storing it in a certain place. And some of the information turns out to be pretty doggone sensitive, or it falls under regulatory or compliance oversight. So you look out here, maybe your HR information, ex-employee files, other compliance data that needs to be stored out there, financial information if you're a financial services company, pharmaceutical trial information that's old but still needs to be kept around. So you can effectively put a lock on this if you're using a flexible storage tier architecture like we're talking about, what externalization enables. It's not that externalization, nobody asks for externalization, nobody asks for blob, to move blobs out. What they ask for is solve these pain points or help me to reach a certain state where I achieve these goals. And if you can do that, now they can meet compliance requirements like HIPAA or FINRA. But if you're going to do something, if you're asking an admin to change the way that they're doing it to achieve a lot of benefit, you don't want to make their job harder in the process. You want to make it easier. And so we do that by having built-in automation to the system that does a couple things. One, give you the ability to control that movement, that storage, that routing that goes on as content hits different thresholds. Hasn't been touched in 6 months, move it to A. It hasn't been touched in 12 months, move it to B. After 2 years and it's non-critical and non-sensitive, delete it automatically. Okay. If it's sensitive, put it in this kind of a storage device. You set that up once inside a StoragePoint, and that becomes your wingman. It goes and does all of that for you automatically. Now, also having those retention rules built into a solution demonstrates to the legal community that you're being proactive and provide thorough adherence to your compliance policy. Okay. Something that you're not going to get without this kind of a solution. SharePoint is not going to provide that. And we work with everybody. Pick your favorite storage device out there, and chances are that we support it and work with it. And that includes a lot of very brand name compliant storage vendors. We have connectors and arrangements with all of these guys. So in sum, you have a rapidly growing environment, slowing performance, making SharePoint difficult to manage. It's very costly to throw hardware solution at it. A lot of people want to store content inside of SharePoint, and they can't because of these limitations. And if you let them go rogue and store it elsewhere, you're going to be out of compliance. You've lost control. You don't even know what's out there. So when you face these challenges, you need a solution, and that solution is an intelligent storage management solution, and that's where we can start to introduce the concept of StoragePoint. And the concept is take all that content that's creating these problems and move it to an appropriate storage tier that gives you all of flexibility and benefit. This is where you want to really focus in on those business benefits. And business benefits are improving that user experience, reducing cost, being able to comply with these different requirements, and then ensure business continuity. These are the stories, the sound bites, and things that you should be having dialogues with people on. Minimize the amount of conversation around externalization and blobs. Maximize the conversation around, are you dealing with some of these issues? Are you looking to achieve some of these goals? So let's talk about StoragePoint for a few minutes here. What is StoragePoint? It's an intelligent solution that allows you to manage your content, and in particularly the storage environment for SharePoint, as well as file servers, to reduce the cost and improve user experience while meeting those compliance requirements. And I always like to have a different, easy to understand visual. If any of you have ever taken all your excess junk that you don't want to get rid of, and maybe it's not junk, maybe it's important stuff, but you have a project going on in the house, you move it out to one of these storage locations, an easy storage. And if it came with a personal concierge that moved it for you and managed it and returned it back when you needed it, that's kind of what StoragePoint is. It's a different place that gives you a lot of flexibility to do a lot of different things. So how does it work? It basically, as we talked about, it moves stuff out, creating a highly flexible and scalable environment that meets your compliance needs, delivers a lot of savings, and then allows you to manage file server content, which was previously also excluded because people didn't want to import many, many terabytes directly into SharePoint. I'm not going to go through this verbatim. Understand, and I'll send these slides out after the call, or I'll send out a link to them on SharePoint. Here's a bunch of challenges that you can discuss and talk about. What are the key challenges and how do we help on those? Top differentiators. When people do finally start to buy into the need, wow, there is an alternative way, and it sounds pretty good, and I know you have a solution for it, so why is your solution better? Well, top differentiators is, look, we are the market leader. This is one where we are clear head and shoulders above the rest, and it's because of that and how long we've been doing it. It's a low-risk, trusted, proven solution. When you're asking people to change their storage architecture, it requires trust. Okay, they don't want to add risk. So making this a comfortable solution with a lot of trust is very important. In the slides that you'll be able to take a look at, there are several case studies, and you can just draw anecdotes from them. You can talk about, yeah, we have a customer that achieved 50% reduction in cost because they were faced with this challenge and they implemented it. You guys know how to use case studies, so I'm not going to go into great depth there. You also should be, especially with the wonderful new pricing tools and stuff, but at a glance, here's the pricing on it. It's not a cheap product, and our ASP, as I mentioned, is over $30,000. And when you look at the top accounts that we're going to be targeting for upcoming campaign, you're talking about accounts that typically have potential for six-figure deals. This can make everybody healthy very quickly. A little bit of prospecting intelligence. Who should you be going after aside from who we're going to ask you to call? Well, you can go into any industry, but if you go into any industry without going into verticals, look for mature SharePoint environments where they have a lot of content, a terabyte or more is ideal, where they're experiencing a lot of growth, where they're having some major problems around performance or long backup times. Any vertical that's regulated, that has compliant requirements, and then some specific ones where they have massive onboarding of content around scan and capture, which is like insurance and retail. In here, there's going to be a few things you can go back and please revisit these. These are key qualifying questions. You see the question on the left, for example, how big is your SharePoint farm? If you're asking them in the course of a conversation and they come back, they say anything over a terabyte, that's good. That's a good response, and that's a good indicator. So you want to look for things that are good indicators in their responses here. Once again, I'm not going to lead you down exactly through this because I think this is something that it's good to print out and have handy for yourself. Buying indicators. Okay, we talked about them, but this is capturing them all on a nice, easy sheet. High content volume, slow backups, high storage costs, large file types, content that's sitting outside of their control, whether it's because users have gone out there or they have a bunch of file share content that's just outside of their current grasp. And then, of course, there's going to be people who have different kinds of objections. So I wanted you to have a little handle on what you can say when you hear these different objections. And if you're finding different ones that crop up periodically, let us know. If we're hearing something that's different, objection handling sometimes changes. One of the big ones we used to get was, well, Microsoft says I shouldn't do it. Well, guess what? That one's not an objection anymore, especially when you can point them in the direction that Microsoft now does it. Kind of understanding buyers and influence. Bottom line is, this is something that it tends to be either a SharePoint admin, a storage admin. Sometimes there are other influencers out there, like the business line owners. These are the people that are kind of core. We're not asking you to go to seek out too many different people outside of who you're used to selling to. It's a matter of having the right conversations with them to bring this to the foreground of what they're thinking about. In our campaign, we're focusing in on current buyers, so they're already a pro, Metalogix friendly type of environment. Strangely enough, competition has actually diminished in recent years, with the exception of Do Nothing. A lot of people continue to think that they can get by with SharePoint out of the box. If they're actually experiencing pain and you ask the right questions, the ones that are giving you truthful answers will realize the need on this. And in fact, when we analyzed all the deals that have been done over the last couple of quarters, you guys were fantastic about putting enough notes in there that showed us that these were real pain points that people were looking to solve. We weren't cramming product in just to sell through. I think it's hard to do that anyway anymore. But the people who were successful wins had real pain that matched up exactly to the points that we're talking about. There are other RBS providers. AvePoint has a solution. I rarely see them creeping up in conversation anymore for StoragePoint. But if you do, there's going to be some things that you can understand about them, why we lose and why we win. Use these key points, and if you get into a deal, remember, Steve Goldberg's out there, I'm out there. If we need to, we go grab the right developer, we grab Trevor. We are a support team that can help you on really challenging competitive environments. And for many of you who may not have sold StoragePoint much, this is an opportunity to bring in a good, well-rounded team to help you win the deal. The one you're probably going to encounter the most is the out-of-the-box, and you'll get an occasional file stream question. So they'll say, like, well, Microsoft gives me this thing called file stream. Don't see it mentioned too much anymore. I think everybody's kind of seen the emperor has no clothes there. It's not a product. It was a code snippet that people try to develop and build on, and it doesn't do a lot of things. It doesn't support compression and encryption, and it doesn't automatically move your blobs, and you can't go store it wherever you want to. There's a lot of challenges. So really it comes back to those points that I was talking about trust, proven, low risk. That's what we're offering here. We want to take your environment that's very important to you and give you a solution that you can feel confident is going to deliver where you need it to deliver. Let's see here. So we have all of this coming into play because one of the things that we have going on is a lot of resources going into a StoragePoint campaign where we're selling to. We're going to go back into the existing content matrix customer base, and we're focused on the top 500 accounts that we have, and we'll break that down for you here in a minute in terms of what we're asking of you versus what we're doing completely on the marketing and product side. These tend to be terabyte plus size environments, particularly the larger up this list you go. And there should be a lot of really good things that we can provide to them as an incentive. And if you start with the messaging around, look, you have content matrix, you know how much content you have, you know the challenges of managing it. Let's have a conversation about these key discussion points, and then if you find that some of them are surfacing, it tells you that there's a good opportunity here. And we wanted to help kickstart things with this campaign by hosting a webinar. So Trevor is going to be presenting an exclusive Content Matrix customer-only event. It's going to be on November 16th. And what we're going to do is take that list of 500 people, going to only break it down to the top 200, and that 200 is going to be parsed out to all of you. And what we're asking of you, you're going to have at most a handful of accounts. We want you to personally invite them. Pick up the phone, call them. It's a great reason to have that next dialogue with them, because these are your big accounts. You want to have every opportunity to talk to them. And it's kind of a special webinar. It's not like to the general public. And we're going to be supporting this by sending out all kind of information via to the 500, including the 200, but by focusing you on the top 200, that really allows us to generate a good turnout for this with our biggest customers, with one of our best selling assets in Trevor, who's basically, he created SharePoint, or StoragePoint. So voice of authority that has been the rock in this marketplace. So we have a variety of assets for you. Sorry about that. Come on. There we go. Okay. So we have some selling assets out there that will help educate folks. And we're trying to get better about the types of assets that are easily consumable. So we have 2 videos that you can reference. One are around blobs are bad. That was pretty well received when we first introduced it here at the beginning of the year. And then storage and information archiving. And that's kind of the bigger picture around being able to sell multiple products and talking about the solution on a whole different level. And we also have this wonderful brand new infographic that contains a lot of good relevant information that people find very appealing, and it's easily consumed. And what it can do is act as those trigger events. We'll be sending those out. That will help generate some additional leads, but you can also use it to share with your customers as you're having dialogues. There's a variety of other ebooks out there. There's a SharePoint MVP guide, an optimization ebook, managing content storage lifecycle, and shattering those limitations. So we have a lot of things that you can use to help get people farther along. Remember, one of the biggest challenges we have is lack of education. I talk to people who are probably 6, 8, 10 years into these kinds of roles, and I am shocked at how many people just fundamentally have never come across externalizing SharePoint content as an option to solving these challenges. We also have Storage Expert, now part of Migration Expert, and we are creating a new registration page so we can send people directly to relevant information about Storage Expert. And this is my favorite tool for you to become familiar with. Okay, Storage Expert, in a nutshell, gives you a lightweight executable that doesn't mess with your StoragePoint environment, but with a light touch goes in and very quickly tells an admin the state of their storage environment, how much structured versus unstructured content they have, how much is stored in different databases, how old the content is, what percentage is from untouched for a long period of time, how much is large files, and it basically gives them this visual clue that they have a need for something like this and now can validate that. And then there's a nice ROI tool that allows them to actually generate a business case that they can share internally. This is one of the best things in terms of you helping them to help themselves, and in turn they'll become more of an active prospect for you. So thank you and happy hunting. Remember, it's all about providing a solution to all these challenges that gives them a flexible, scalable storage architecture that meets all of these different pain points that they're encountering. They just don't know how to vocalize it yet, and you're helping them to give voice to that. So with that, what I wanted to do is let me return back over here and take a look at, see if we have questions out here.
Can you hear me, Paul?
Yep, now I can hear you.
All right, sorry. Computer problems, Skype problems. So I completely agree with the approach to going to these content matrix customers. I think that one of the things that the field's going to have an issue with is the price discrepancy. You know, I'm running into it with a content matrix customer that owns today where I'm in a fierce battle against AvePoint, and I've got multiple price quotes showing that AvePoint's charging $2,995, and we're $16,000 more expensive. So how do we articulate the value that we offer at $16K more per server if the customer isn't completely galvanized around MetaLogix?
That's a great question, and this is one where I'm gonna partially answer, and I'm gonna spin it back to the excellent sales skills of the organization here. This is a fundamental, critical decision that they're going to be making that's going to impact usually hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars for larger accounts of their architecture, their storage environment, the need to be able to manage all of this stuff and do so in a way where they feel very comfortable and it's a trusted type of environment solution. And one of the things that we can do with StoragePoint, probably as much as any of our products, is point to our base of reference customers to say, look, this has been around. We've got 6,000 customers using this. Okay. This is an environment where I come back to those key messages. Price is it should not be the issue in their mind. It should be, are you getting a solution that's going to provide the maximum benefit at the lowest risk and enable them to be the hero inside their organization? Feature by feature comparison, just to let you know, if we go into a feature battle with them, it's not that we will lose, but there's so much parity at that feature specific level, it's a rat hole. You want to keep it out, and I think the biggest weapon that we have is saying this is a product that has been tested under fire with the biggest organizations out there. And what we can deliver in this is a solution and an architecture. If they aren't a MetaLogix customer today, they can buy StoragePoint without buying an entire platform to get this one particular thing. If they're already one of our customers, that's great. If they're already an AvePoint customer, there is a bit of uphill battle because they've already made that decision around the platform. So I'd split my segments of prospects, and if it's the one in the middle where they don't have AvePoint already, you can focus in on the low risk proposition, and you can focus in on the fact that you can get a storage optimization performance solution as a standalone device that helps all these without having to go and install an entire separate platform that needs its pretty extensive requirements.
Yeah, so I think that's what you ended up getting to is a great point, right? And I think that's something that would help the broader field that might not have the, all the knowledge in terms of what AvePoint takes to stand up. But I think talking about ease of install and, the fact that you don't have a platform already, right, from AvePoint are things that play to our strengths. But the bottom line is most people have to test more than just one vendor, right. Especially if they're spending over six figures, right? If that's what we're talking about, right? So that's, saying that we've been the market leader in the ecosystem for the longest time isn't going to prevent people from testing other vendors is my only point. And having some of those points about, what are really the architecture differences and what it means for actually the customer, I think would be helpful in the field.
So this is one of those where I'm just being practical here. There's very few reps who find themselves in really large opportunities And if you do, this is where we should be, using it as a team selling approach. I gave you pull Goldberg, pull Trevor into these early when it's clear that these are large opportunities and it's going to be a fight. These are good uses of us, and we can do knowledge transfer at the same time as tackling very specific things that are coming up. But I think that what we wanted to focus on today a little bit was there's this larger movement within our sales environment where, as we look at net new logos that are being onboarded and we look at how much we want to really go and mine our existing customer database, we really want to take advantage of the existing customer database. And that's where we're going to start. That's going to be the tip of our spear, getting in there and leveraging these customers who already have made those other decisions probably when they were deciding on content matrix. And once they've had hopefully a really good experience there, and we've been their partner in helping them through with really quality products and stuff, now we can come back with something where they're going to be predisposed not to want to go down that other route. Okay, so that's one of the reasons we're starting with this campaign here. We think it will yield higher dividends if we're diligent in really hitting this customer base and focusing in on how, the need. The need has continued to grow in the customer base and accelerate, as a matter of fact, because it's not just content that's growing, it's the type of content. And when that happens, people who previously had made a decision not to, they may be hitting those issues with backup windows. They may be hitting issues with cost performance of their storage environment. They may be saddled with new regulatory or compliance issues. So the receptiveness, it is catching them a bit at the right time. But we have to go back out there and try. And this is where we see a much better result than going natively trying to hunt for a new logo and then also explain the value of StoragePoint. So what we're doing, we made a conscious decision, is to apply a lot of resources around farming the existing large accounts, our strategic accounts, the people who've shown they rely on SharePoint heavily. And we know that when that happens, these problems are endemic. And so we got to just get to the right person who's having that. Somebody, Eva, see a question from you about, do we currently have plans to integrate, expand our archiving capabilities of StoragePoint? So as a matter of fact, yeah, that's, and Steve Goldberg, do you happen to be on right now?
I am.
So would you like to share a little bit about our future plans for these coming together?
Yeah, so as soon as Archive Manager actually gets this next release out here in the next few days, we're going to start work on integrating StoragePoint and Archive Manager together. And that means that we will finally have a story where we can sell files, file servers, Exchange, and SharePoint archiving all in one interface. So StoragePoint is basically going to be the vehicle that will push data to the Archive Manager product, and Archive Manager will be able to provide e-discovery functionality, meaning customers can come in and search for SharePoint data to provide to legal teams, to provide to anybody who's asking for any kind of e-discovery. And they can also apply things like retention, legal holds, tag that data within Archive Manager itself. And so there's like a lot of good stories that we can start to tell from a compliance standpoint once we get that integration done.
Is it going to be an integrated platform, or are the products going to be heavily integrated? Are they going to be standalone? Are they going to be relying on another, right? From an install perspective, from a deployment perspective?
Both will need to be installed, but all the work that will be done will be from one interface, which is Archive Manager. So once installed once configured as well, once installed and configured, you'll be able to just look at Archive Manager as one pane of glass for all three platforms, Exchange, Files, and SharePoint. You can kind of think of SharePoint or a StoragePoint as sort of the plumbing or the vehicle that just essentially gets the files over to Archive Manager, over to an archive.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, any other questions before we let you get back to your day here? We're here for you. So this is don't feel rushed off. If you have something, please bring it up. If you're thinking about it, somebody else is probably thinking about it as well. All right. Well, we'll do the going once, twice, and three times. And thank you very much for spending good 45 minutes, 50 minutes of your day here with us. I hope that this has been helpful. I would be very interested in feedback as we are going to continue to do training as to whether you liked this approach of really breaking it into more of a little bit of storytelling mode to help understand it, because I know that we have a lot of very complex topics, and sometimes we want to try to simplify it down so you can have real and genuine conversations with users rather than trying to go toe-to-toe with them on technical jargon, because they're going to win those battles. And we want to make sure that you understand the nature of their pain, and that then you can match our solutions into that after you've kind of earned the right with them. So thanks again, happy hunting, and you will be getting an email out from us with a list of your companies that we would like you to call, and you'll also get an email. You'll get a copy of the email that we are sending out inviting people, so that you can both forward that to people if they expressed interest or they can't find the one that we had sent them. So thank you very much, and we will talk to you all at another time.